Alex and Susan. It's amazing to have you on my podcast today. And I know you've been working in City Hall in London for a while, and it's your first term. So what is it like to work in this building? Is it somehow happening to be boring, or it's repetitive, or it's actually quite exciting?
It's very frustrating because we can see lots of things that are going wrong in London. Alex concentrates on the economy, and clearly now we've got a Labour government, things will be worse, and I'm sure he'll tell you about that. And I really concentrate on policing. I'm chairman of the policing committee at the moment. We're looking into particularly violence against women and girls, which is at epidemic levels here. And I've done a big thing on public policing. When you look at all of the demonstrations that have been going on, just how the police deal with that. So we're looking at various different things that are going on in London and going wrong in London. The frustrating bit is when we get to ask the mayor questions, because he never answers questions properly, and both of us today have asked questions. I've asked questions, funnily enough, on the economy and on the way he spends his money, or rather taxpayers' money. And I'll let Alex say what he's asked questions on, but he just never answers questions properly. So we spend a lot of time finding things that need to be addressed, because that's our job. We're a scrutiny body. So we find lots of things that need to be addressed. We ask him about them, and we're very lucky if we ever get a proper answer. So from that point of view, it's very frustrating. From another point of view, every day is like a school day. We learn things all the time about this wonderful city. So I'm very happy to be working here. I just find it frustrating at times.
Do you think the fact that the mayor often does not answer questions directly is correlated with his unwillingness to make probably a mistake, or to let everybody know that things are going wrong, or with the fact that he actually does not have to? When I interviewed Thomas before, he said that your powers are basically a bit limited in terms of what you can help mayor to do, what you can persuade him to do. So what are your powers, and how can you force the mayor to make changes?
So the London Assembly doesn't have any statutory powers to force the mayor to make changes, except for two things. So number one, if 2/3 of the Assembly votes to make changes to his budget, they can do that. I don't think it's ever happened in history, mainly because the left-wing parties tend to generally support the budget we oppose, because it's generally filled with wasteful spending, which Susan has focused on today, and tax rises which are destroying Londoners and London businesses and various other things. And the other thing, summonsing power. Now I think Susan actually utilised her summonsing power as the chairwoman of Police and Crime Committee to summons the mayor to come and answer for the disastrous job that he's done with policing in our city, which was exposed in one of the reviews. I think Sir Thomas Windsor's review. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. So, those are the two statutory things. But ultimately, it's up to Londoners. I'm careful with my words, but I get extremely frustrated with some people that complain about the state of London, but yet voted again for this awful mayor. And secondly, those that don't vote. So if you really want to get rid of this appalling mayor, well, you need to vote him out next time.
And budget is actually one of the things that when I've done an interview with Andrew Boff, and when I've done an interview with Thomas, it's one of the things that we haven't talked much about. So please, whoever wants to expand on that, tell us more on what are things in budget that you consider are wasteful.
Okay, well, he's got a £21 billion budget, and that shocks people when we actually say it. I don't think people can believe it. People have actually said to me, do you mean 21 million? No, it is £21 billion. And if we take my passion, which is policing, the Metropolitan Police need more money, and he's just not finding it for them. I think council tax has gone up something like 79%, 75% since he came into power. And last year, or this budget going through, he said he hated putting council tax up, or his part of it. but he had to because the police need more money. Well, the police still need a lot more money. He's not putting that extra money, all of it, into the police. And we've got to recognise that with the government's hike in national insurance for employers, as an example, the Metropolitan Police will have to find an extra £60 million to cover that. So when he says, oh, the government's giving extra money, he fails to mention that £60 million of that is actually what they've caused because they've put the national insurance up on an employer. So there's so many different avenues. He wastes money. Today, I use the example. We've found out through Taxpayers Alliance that TfL, Transport for London, have spent in the last year £7.9 million on what they call facility time. So for people to go and work on union business. Well, when we're all crying out for money in various different areas, why on earth would you allow £7.9 million to be used on what we call facility time for the unions? We looked at equality, the EDI payments for staff. I think it was something like 450 million, 450,000 for that per year. That is something that could be cut down drastically. There's just so many areas he could cut down his spending and spend it on things that Londoners want. And if you look at any opinion poll, Londoners want to feel safer, and they feel less and less safe. And we've got to look at it. If you look at tourism, people love coming here, but people are becoming more and more concerned about their safety. So spending on the Metropolitan Police and spending on keeping us safe has got to be the way forward.
And I assume policing would be one of the ways that all of those redistributed money potentially could go to. And what are other areas that you potentially could redistribute money to?
So we had our budget amendment, which was voted down by the left-wing parties, so Labour, the Greens and Liberal Democrats. You know, there's an obscene number of, let's say, people in TfL that are earning hundreds of thousands of pounds. You know, why? We should be investing that money in TfL services and frontline workers that are actually running the service rather than fat cats and bureaucrats. You know, I'm sure there are some people doing a good job at the top of that organisation, but if you ask me, that money could be better invested in making sure Londoners get from point A to point B. So, you know, what happens in large organisations like this is, you know, you go along and people don't monitor the different pots and then they explode out of all control. So there are various different things that we can look at. Another one is London and Partners, which the last time I checked was getting tens of millions. And all they do is push the mayor's propaganda about how wonderful he is, how much he's doing for London's economy. And it's all a lie. It's all a lie.
Both of you have mentioned that you're quite unhappy with what Mayor currently is doing, but as far as I know, he's been in power for quite a long time, and people keep re-electing him from one time to another. And I'm wondering, the first question that comes to my head is, why do people still re-elect him? Do you think people do not understand what he stands for, or they genuinely want to vote for him?
If I may just, because Susan was our mayoral candidate, she'll have her own views, but my view is, if you look at the times he got elected, so 2016, quite frankly, I don't think our mayoral campaign was what it should have been. It wasn't a bad one. We had a good candidate in Zach Goldsmith, but we could have been better in getting across what a Labour mayor meant for London. The second election came off of the back of Brexit, and London was a Remain city. And, you know, a lot of Conservatives that would normally have voted Conservative voted for Sadiq Khan because of the things he was saying on the EU. In Susan's election, the Conservative Party was in a dire state in the polls. We were polling at 18% in London. And one of the things that makes me angry is that people forget Susan performed 12 points better and hundreds of thousands of votes better than the party did at the general election. So if it hadn't been for Susan Hall, we would have had a much worse mayoral result. Now, so of course, Susan can't say those things about herself, but I don't know what your views are.
Well, I wouldn't say that. I would just say I don't think lots of people understand what they're voting for. I think there's an apathy there. People, it's like with the locals, sometimes they don't bother. People don't always get the different levels of government and governance, which is a shame. Very often, if, say, the Conservatives are in charge of the government, they assume they're in charge of the local councils, and of course it's not that way. So whether people should be taught more in schools as to how it all works, I would approve of that. Why they keep voting for Sadiq Khan is clearly beyond me, because we had such a good, Alex was with me through the whole year, and we were knocking on doors. We were out 7 days a week. We couldn't have worked harder for the mayoralty. And in outer London, people were so fed up with him because of the ULEZ and various other things. So we did the best we could. I only hope people's eyes are opened. Although whether Sadiq Khan will stand again, I think is somewhat doubtful, because people are beginning to realise that, you know, you can only blame the previous mayor for so long, and he's still doing that. He's always said, give me a Labour government and, you know, life will be wonderful. Well, it's clearly proving that is not the case at all. So all the things that he said, if only I had a Labour government, you know, life would be wonderful. It's being proven that life is far worse, because this government is so incapable of running a country. And I think, therefore, he will get a cushy job somewhere doing something with the environment and a hefty salary with it. I think that's what he's aiming for now.
Susan, one more question for you. You've mentioned the point on violence against women and girls.
Yeah.
And at least in my time in European Council of Europe, and in any European organization, I think now it's a big question on how to solve this, and a lot of measures are taken again to prevent these things from happening. And some people are even arguing that measures that are taken right now might be a little bit excessive. But why do you think the violence against women and girls is rising over time in London?
There's so many answers to that. Down to basics, we need more police officers. If you look at the caseloads for people that are trying to deal with it, they're far too big. So from the policing point of view, that's an issue. There's no doubt that social media is playing its part. I think also with more and more people coming from different countries who regard women as second-class citizens, that can't be helping the situation. So it's no one thing. There's lots of different reasons, I think. But if we don't try and deal with it, it's really getting to epidemic levels. When I've had people in front of my committee, they are wringing their hands saying it has never been as bad. It's getting worse very, very quickly. And they don't know how to cope with all the victims of the violence, because there's so many that we haven't got enough resource in place, we haven't got enough people that can help. It is getting very, very bad. And for those of us with daughters, wives and a daughter, I mean, it's very worrying for all of us on different levels.
Yeah, I mean, just on that, I mean, everything that Susan says is completely right. And it's evidenced. It's not just Conservatives saying it.
No.
You know, it's what sexual offences have gone up by 7.7% over the last year. Rapes have gone up by 2.3%. You know, so whenever anyone tells you London is getting safer, that is a lie. It's a lie.
So perhaps the last question to both of you: what is your plan as Conservatives moving forward to maybe oppose the mayor, or maybe what are the other options for Londoners to choose another mayor, and how is that better?
Well, we wait to see who puts their name forward for our next candidate, and just as we did for last year, we will work our butt off to try and get a Conservative in place, because I think Conservatives understand what's got to happen. This mayor absolutely doesn't.
Yeah, I think Susan's absolutely right, and I think the party needs to throw their complete support behind the Conservative Party, behind whoever the candidate is. And I would say to Londoners and to anyone watching, the worst day of Boris Johnson's mayoralty was far better than the best day of Sadiq Khan's mayoralty. Almost anyone would be better in the job than this man, and whoever his Labour successor is, if he doesn't indeed run again. This is the thing. people can vote however they want at various different elections, but in terms of London, it's never been better than when we've had a Conservative mayor.
Well, thank you so much for both of your time for the interview, and it has been a pleasure to interview you.
It's been a
Thank you.
pleasure to be interviewed. Thank you very much.